This is a genuine story of an experience that happened to my family almost 30 years ago. Back then, when she was 3 years old, my cousin had an imaginary friend called Bobby. My cousin would play and talk with Bobby for ages at a time. She also did other strange stuff, like insisting that Bobby had a place set at the dinner table at mealtimes and having a cushion on the floor next to her own so that Bobby could sit and watch telly with her. My aunt, although getting increasingly uneasy, just went along with it for a week or so. However, she put her mind at rest after consulting some child-rearing books from the local library, which told her it was just a normal childhood phase her daughter was going through, and so she stopped worrying about Bobby. A few months later, during the winter, my uncle had not long started a new job that involved shift work. This meant that on this particular evening, he was working a night shift, leaving my aunt and my cousin alone in the house. It got to be my cousin's bedtime, so my aunt took my cousin upstairs and got her ready for bed. As was now usual, my cousin asked my aunt if Bobby was also to go to bed, to which my aunt just went along with it and replied that yes, Bobby was to go to his bed as well. After getting my cousin changed, they went through to her bedroom, read my cousin, and Bobby, of course, a bedtime story, tucked her and Bobby into bed, kissed her goodnight, and finally, my aunt was finished with her motherly duties for the evening. It was time to relax and wind down. My aunt left the bedroom and started to go back downstairs to have a cup of tea and watch some telly. My aunt had just reached the bottom of the stairs when my cousin shouted from her bedroom that my aunt had forgotten to turn the bedroom light off. She would normally sleep with her bedroom door open and the hall light on. Sighing, my aunt turned around and started back up the stairs. Just as she got to the top stair, she saw the light go off in my cousin's bedroom. My cousin then shouted, "It's okay, Mummy." Bobby turned it off. My aunt rushed into the bedroom a split second after my cousin shouted this, and my cousin was still all tucked up in her bed. As the light switch at that time was too high up on the wall for my then 3-year-old little cousin to reach and was on the opposite side of the room to the bed next to the door, my aunt just froze in the doorway for a few seconds, not knowing what had just happened or what she should do. My aunt, now freaking out inside her head but trying not to show it, decided just to act normally, said goodnight again to my cousin, then went very quickly back downstairs and immediately phoned my uncle at his work. She sounded so terrified on the phone that my uncle asked his supervisor if he could leave work early due to an emergency at home. I remember when my aunt told me about this incident, she said that while she was waiting for my uncle to get home, she was so frightened that she didn't think she could have gone back up to the room, even if the house had caught fire. The next morning, my aunt sat down with my cousin and had a conversation that ended with her telling my cousin that she shouldn't play with Bobby again. My cousin said that Bobby was upset about this and wanted to stay. My aunt lost her temper and said Bobby had to leave, and that was the end of it. A few days later, as my cousin had not spoken to or mentioned Bobby since that conversation, my aunt casually asked my cousin over lunch what had happened to Bobby. My cousin looked up at her mother and replied with a question that chilled my aunt. "What is a mean lady, Mummy?" My aunt asked her where she had heard such a phrase and told her she shouldn't say something like that. My cousin replied, "That's what Bobby said when he left, Mummy. He said he was leaving because of the mean lady." Very creepy story here. Haunted me well into my teenage years. Okay, so I was about 11 or 12. My parents had just gotten separated and were filing for divorce. They sold our house, and my mother and I moved onto a farm a few miles up the road, onto a random dirt road nobody knew existed. It was called Mitchell Road, named after the late farmer who owned the land. To add perspective, the road is about a mile long, winding uphill through dense New York forest. About half a mile up the road is a pond, and then a very nice house with amazing bushes and a great yard. Another half mile up the hill, there's a large horse farm with a barn and house to the right. To the left was our house, a restored barn attached to a huge yellow 2-family farmhouse where 2 families lived. Along the small driveway, there was a large trailer to the right, just past the houses, and a place where cows used to be slaughtered. Further down was another house with a family. If you kept going, there was a half-mile-long driveway leading to our landlord's home, buried in dense wilderness. Honestly, it was a creepy place to live. Anyway, my bedroom was upstairs and I had a window overlooking the road leading up to our house and all the fields below. There was a huge crucifix erected in the field, which we thought was kind of odd, but it was somewhat normal for our area. There are a lot of religious people in the tri-state area, especially in my town. Then one night, about a week after moving there, I was woken up by a pulsating glow in my bedroom. I thought the house was on fire, but then I saw tree shadows moving on the walls. I put 2 and 2 together and realized the light was coming from behind the trees in our backyard. I went up to the window and what I saw was the creepiest thing I have ever witnessed. The cross was fully illuminated, lighting up the entire surrounding area. Small fires burned around the cross, and beyond those fires, I saw things moving. It took me a moment to focus on the shapes, but I eventually realized they were people on horses, dressed in black robes with pointed hoods. I could see them clearly as they rode through the firelight. I don't remember what happened next because I apparently blacked out and collapsed back into my bed, which was under the window. I was woken up in the morning for school by my mom, and I did not forget what I had seen. I looked back out the window, and the cross was still there, but smoke was rising from it. It seemed to be made of metal, either white or silver with blue trim. I could still see smoke drifting up as the fires had not completely burned out. After school that day, I went out to check the area and found horse tracks in the ground, along with several empty liquor bottles. It was all incredibly strange and unsettling. I told my mom, and we immediately left that place. She put me in therapy for a few weeks just to make sure I was okay. I will never forget what I saw. It was just so eerie. If any of you want to look up the address to confirm everything, it is 131 Mitchell Road, Hoosick Falls, New York. You might be able to see the approximately 25-foot tall cross. It stands behind a row of houses, next to the pond in an open field. There is also some creepy stuff in the woods across the road from the houses. It's some kind of greenhouse-like structure with furniture and taxidermy, wrapped in plastic. One day, while exploring, I wandered inside and was immediately confronted by a strange man I had never seen before, who didn't live in the area. He was wearing clothing that looked like something from the 1940s and appeared to be about 100 years old. He shouted, "Hey kid, you're not supposed to be in here. This is private property. Get out of here, now." He scared the life out of me, so I ran home. I never told anyone because I thought my mom might get mad at me for causing trouble. This is only the second time I have revisited these experiences because they were so traumatizing. The first time was in therapy. Recently, a young couple was in a fatal crash on that road. They crashed around 5 a.m. and nobody found them until a day later, when it was too late. They weren't from the area, and no one knew why they were there. Their family didn't know either. Strange and unsettling things have always happened on that road as far as I know. The older couple in the really nice house down the road worked at my school. Years later, when I was in high school, I talked to the woman, the school nurse, about how weird that place was. She said, "Yeah, well, Old Man Mitchell was an occultist years ago and had a family of 25, including multiple wives who would often perform sacrifices next to the cross and rituals every full moon. Most likely, the family still does this, and I believe this is what I witnessed." In the early 80s, my dad dated and almost married a woman I'll call Jane. Jane really loved my dad. Jane's mom also really loved my dad, and both women had a difficult time with the breakup, even a decade later. I'm not sure about any of the details. Part of Jane's problem was her frequent use of various substances. She broke into the mobile home my parents rented during their first year of marriage and rearranged items in the kitchen and bathroom. She did the same strange thing a few years later at a different residence, but left a tube of red lipstick in the couch and a cold Dr. Pepper on the kitchen counter. My parents were diehard Mountain Dew drinkers. If she was bold enough to break in, it was a safe bet she was also driving by and watching when my parents were coming and going. There were dozens of phone calls. She would call, say nothing, and then hang up. My dad never talked about any direct interactions during this time, but I wouldn't be surprised if she had publicly approached him and done something out of the ordinary. Jane's mother was equally unbalanced. During a Christmas shopping trip at the local Walmart, I kept seeing the same older woman around the store. I would have been 9 at the time. This was our big gift bag shopping trip, where we made about 20 gift sets, so we were in multiple areas of the store for quite a while. Later that night, my dad got a call from Jane's mother. She was sobbing into the phone, apologizing for following us around the store. She felt that we were supposed to be her grandchildren and rambled a bunch of nonsense. The next summer, my brother and I were playing in the backyard when a woman in khakis, a polo shirt, and sunglasses came strolling up with a clipboard. She said, "Hi guys," and began looking at the power meter standing about 20 feet away from us. My mom, who had been doing laundry, walked by a window, saw the woman, and came outside. She asked the woman how she was, and the lady gave a friendly reply. After writing down a few more notes on the clipboard, she left without identifying herself or her company. Since the driveway was at the front of the house and not visible from the backyard, we had no idea how she arrived. The interaction was quick and didn't seem unusual at the time. 3 days later, the power company's actual meter reader showed up. My mom, having already seen the woman with the clipboard, asked who he was and demanded identification. The man with the power company verified that no one had checked meters in the past few days and that they had no female employees assigned to that kind of work. It was suspected that Jane may have convinced one of her friends to attempt to kidnap my brother, who would have been 5, and or me. The creepiest and scariest part of all this is that neither my brother nor I were made aware of the stalking and possible kidnapping attempt until we were teenagers. I don't know if Jane or her mother were only watching us at random moments in public, or if they were secretly attending our school events and other functions. TLDR. Over 30 years ago, my dad got involved with someone who never moved on from the relationship. She and her mother became obsessive, stalked my brother and me when we were children, made dozens of silent phone calls, and possibly arranged a failed kidnapping. When I was 15, I was followed everywhere by two men in two gold Dodge Intrepids of different years. One of them was a man in his early 30s with dark hair and a mustache, and the other was a man in his 60s with white hair. I have no idea what their height or weight was because I only saw them sitting down. For about the first month, I thought I was imagining things because no one else had seen them firsthand. Then, one day, I was walking with my boyfriend, and the older man kept circling the area in his car. I pointed him out and started counting how many times he turned around to drive past us again. After the same car with the same driver had passed us 15 times within a 6-block area, my boyfriend finally believed me. It was unsettling, but not terrifying at that point. They never came to my house directly, never spoke to me directly, and never tried to approach me, at least not yet. But every time I left my house, one of them would follow me. My mom saw them. My adopted mom saw them. My brother, my boyfriend, most of my friends, and even the police saw them. Then, one night in the winter, I had a fight with my mom. Without thinking, I stormed out of the house at 1 a.m. to clear my head. I made it about 3 blocks when, sure enough, the dark-haired man appeared in his car. That was when I got truly scared. There was no one else on the road. I had no cell phone, no weapon, just me and this man. I knew the area like the back of my hand, so I started running back home, cutting between houses and through back alleys. But every time I emerged from the shadows, he was there in his car. No matter what route I took, he always seemed to get ahead of me. I made it home, and something inside me just broke. At that point, it had been almost a year. Every move I made was being watched. Every time I left the house, every time I went to a store, these two men were watching me. I made up my mind right then that if they were going to harm me, we might as well just get it over with. The next day, the older man followed me again. He pulled up in front of me at an intersection and just sat there smiling. I lost it. I threw myself at his car, trying to break the driver's side window with my elbow. He just laughed, waved, and drove off, leaving me standing in the middle of the street screaming after him, "If you want me, come and get me!" After that, they backed off a little. They still followed me, but they kept more distance. They only directly approached me once, the following spring, when the older man asked if I wanted a ride. I refused, and after that, they seemed to disappear. I still remember every detail. The younger man drove a 1999 gold Dodge Intrepid. The older man drove a 2000 gold Dodge Intrepid and had a Michigan license plate with the number NJA328. They followed me for 15 months, only made direct contact once. And to this day, I have no idea who they were, what they wanted, or if they might come back. Yes, 12 years later, I still worry about them returning. Edit. I just looked up the car models again and realized I was wrong. It was a 1999 and a 2000 model, not a 2002 to 2003. Sorry for the mistake. Back in high school, I was part of our school's cheer squad. During the summer before the new school year, we attended a cheer camp at a local university for a few days to learn new routines, practice stunts, and compete with other teams. Now, I wasn't a typical cheerleader. I liked my space and didn't get rowdy with the others during our downtime. Instead, I preferred to read or listen to music alone in the dorm room I shared with 2 other girls. During these quiet moments, most of the other girls gathered across the hall, blasting music and having fun with their door open. I kept my door shut for some peace. One evening, I was lying on my stomach in front of my boombox, facing away from the dorm door, when I suddenly heard a female whisper, "Turn around." I turned around. No one was there. I brushed it off and went back to what I was doing. A moment later, I heard the same whisper again, "Turn around." I assumed I was hearing voices from the hallway, as the voice sounded like one of the girls on my team. I opened the door to check, expecting to see them still having fun. Instead, the hallway was empty, and the door across from me was shut. It couldn't have been her. I shrugged it off and went back to my music. This time, when I heard the whisper again, "Turn around," it was followed by 2 firm taps on my right shoulder. Oh no. I jumped up and looked around. No one was in the room. I checked the closet near the dorm door, which was shared with the next room occupied by our coach. Nothing. At that point, I decided I was not staying in that room alone. I went across the hall to join the others. Everyone was still busy hanging out. I told my friend, who was really into ghosts, about what had happened. She kept urging me to tell the rest of the team, but I chose to keep quiet. That night, our coach and one of her friends were telling ghost stories. The final story they shared was about the area where we had been practicing, right in front of a white gazebo. According to them, a wealthy couple had donated money to the university to build it for their daughter's wedding. However, before the wedding, she discovered that her fiancé had been unfaithful. Devastated, she took her own life by hanging herself from the gazebo. I found this unsettling because when I was assigned my dorm room, the first thing I noticed was that gazebo, right outside our only window. I wasn't sure how much truth there was to the story, but I will never forget the way the smiles and laughter disappeared from my coach and her friends' faces when my friend convinced me to share what had happened to me. No one slept in that dorm room that night. When I was younger, I had a Siamese cat. I absolutely adored him, and he loved me. I was homeschooled at first, and he would always sit on my lap while I did my assignments. Every night, without fail, he would curl up with me as I slept and stay there until morning. When I started public school, he would greet me at the door when I got home. He passed away in 2007 when I was in 5th grade, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I cried for weeks, and every time I woke up in the middle of the night only to find he wasn't there, it felt like a stab to the heart. That September, as an early birthday present, we got another cat. She was a beautiful silver tabby with big green eyes, soft fur, and a stubby tail. She couldn't replace my Siamese, but she was special in her own way and helped me process my grief. She wasn't much of a cuddler, but she loved to play. By 2009, I was going through a really difficult time. I have struggled with mental illness my entire life, and by then, depression had a firm grip on me. I had no offline friends, but I was part of a great group of online friends who made me feel less alone. Then, just weeks before Christmas, everything changed. My online friends suddenly turned on me, kicking me out of the group and telling me they never wanted to hear from me again. I know it was just the internet, but I truly believed these people were my friends, and their rejection hurt deeply. I tried to hold it together and only cried when I was alone, but inside, I was suffering. A few days after that, I was sitting at my computer, staring at the chat where my former friends were still talking to each other. I couldn't stop a few tears from falling. That's when I heard a loud meow behind me. I turned around, and there, sitting in his usual spot by the fireplace, was my Siamese cat. I completely lost it. I fell out of my chair and lay on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My silver tabby came over and sat with me, and my mom rushed into the room asking if I was okay and what had happened. I didn't want to tell her about the falling out with my online friends. I was afraid she wouldn't understand how much it hurt, so instead I told her that I saw my Siamese sitting by the fireplace. It's been a few years since then. 2010 was a terrible year. I was in a bad accident, had a nervous breakdown, and lost another one of my cats. But I also made a couple of real friends at school who didn't judge me for my struggles. Since 2011, life has been looking up. We adopted a little kitten at the end of 2010, and he's one of the best things in my life. I now have a great group of friends, both online and offline. I'm doing well in school, and I turned 18 last month. But to this day, whenever I start to feel really upset, I still see my Siamese cat wandering around the house, sitting by the fireplace, or curled up on my bed. It doesn't scare me anymore. Instead, it comforts me. Alright, so I've never really talked about this, but I used to work as a night guard at a mall, and some weird stuff happened that I still can't explain. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but this messed me up. I took the job because it was easy money. Walk around, check the cameras, make sure no one breaks in. Simple. The mall shut down at 10 p.m. and my shift was from 11 to 6. The first few nights were boring. Just me, the cameras, and an empty mall. Then weird things started happening. It was little stuff at first. I'd walk by a bench and swear it had moved a few inches from the night before. One time I found a chair from the food court sitting in the middle of the walkway. I checked the security footage thinking maybe the cleaning crew forgot to put it back. But when I rewound the tape, the chair was just moving. No one was there. Just frame by frame, it slowly slid across the floor. I told myself it was a glitch. Cameras mess up sometimes, right? Then one night, around 3 a.m., the monitors flickered. It was quick, but when they came back, I saw her. A woman in a hospital gown standing near the west entrance. She was barefoot, her back to the camera. My stomach dropped. The mall was locked. No one was supposed to be inside. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to check. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Doors still locked. No footprints. Nothing. At this point, I was freaked out, but I convinced myself it had to be some weird recording glitch, maybe an old tape playing over the feed. But then came the night that made me quit. I was doing my rounds when I heard something from the second floor, a soft tapping sound, like bare feet on tile. I stopped at the bottom of the escalator and aimed my flashlight up. The tapping stopped. My radio crackled with static. The air felt thick, like something was pressing down on me. Then the sound started again. Except now, it was coming down the escalator, step by step, slow. deliberate. I pointed my flashlight. There was nothing there, but I could hear it coming closer. I turned to the nearest security camera, thinking maybe I could see something on the feed, and that's when I saw it. On the monitor in the security office, I was standing alone at the bottom of the escalator, but behind me, just outside the flashlight's reach, there was a figure, the woman, perfectly still, head tilted slightly, watching me. I spun around, nothing. I didn't finish my shift. I grabbed my stuff and walked straight out, didn't even lock the doors. A few weeks later, I got a text from the guy who took my job. He asked if I ever saw anything weird on the cameras. I blocked his number. I don't want to know.